work that they have to do during the course of the year, but in order to target that work towards specific goals, an exercise like this would be very prudent. So the purpose of this afternoon would be to identify what the City Council would assess to be the highest priorities you would like city staff to address next year. When we go through the goal-setting exercise, I had the liberty to talk to council prior to tonight's meeting and identify some of the goals you would like to have for consideration for this afternoon. The other thing that we'd like to do is, as I mentioned, talk about what work essential norms are. What type of norms would be beneficial to agree on as far as council members are concerned, so you have more effective working relationships. The majority of the presentation this afternoon will be talking about the work-related norms, because I do think it's essential to have an effective working group. You need to have expectations known of each other and of city staff. The proposed goals and the norms were obtained, as I mentioned, prior to this afternoon. I sat down with each member of the City Council individually, along with city staff, to discuss what the norms could be, what you would see, envision as norms, as well as what the goals are, which you would like some of your fellow colleagues on the dais to consider to identify for next fiscal year. So tonight, Mr. Mayor, we're here not only as a working group, but also to hear from members of the public, for them to discuss with you what norms, what type of expectations as far as goals they would like the City Council to consider during your exercise later this afternoon. So at this time, what I would suggest, Mr. Mayor, is that you open up the public comment portion to hear from members of the public. As we hear from them, I will write down what their suggested goals would be for council to consider. My recommendation would be at the end of the presentation, before we go into prioritizing which goals you would like council and the City Council to address for next fiscal year, is to talk about what these goals are that are being proposed, if there are any, from members of the public. And for those that receive a vote of 3 council members or more, my suggestion would be that that be also added to the list that's before you. Anything less than 3 votes would not be a consensus of the City Council.
Thank you, Rick. Very good. So we're asking the speakers to limit it to 3 minutes. And Susan Bott, followed by Nancy Emerson.
Thank you. After thinking, I'm Susan Bott, and I'm representing Save Our Solvang. After thinking we had successfully demonstrated to the City Council, is this okay? Are you hearing? Okay. That many residents of Solvang and the San Ynez Valley feel deeply that Solvang must not be enlarged at the cost of our surrounding agricultural lands, we were disappointed, to say the least, to see the notion of a sphere of influence increase or annexation appear as the first goal in your list of possible goals. The only part of your goals under A1 address future growth issues, which we can support, as the third: engage in public outreach for future visioning process. We agree completely that the public must be included in the whole process, visioning as well as implementing any moves in the future. As part of this resolve to include the residents in any process, we want the City Council to establish Solvang's current city limit as our urban growth boundary, so Solvang residents have a vote on any proposed new sphere of influence and annexation, other than the existing industrial business SOI to the west of the city. We wonder what is actually meant in item C1 by the phrase augment the tourism industry with development. What kind of development, and how would it augment tourism? We want you to initiate a general plan update beginning with a community visioning process as required by law, assisted by a citizen advisory committee comprised of all community stakeholders. all interested residents should be involved. Just a reminder, through our petition efforts, we have 472 residents of Solvang who are very interested in having a vote on any annexations and/or expansion of the city limits. Another 212 Valley residents want you to know that your actions affect them as well. Thank you for holding this workshop. We look forward to more in the future. And by the way, here are a few more petitions.
Thank you, Susan. Nancy Emerson, followed by Hank Hamburg.
I'm Nancy Emerson, speaking as representative for We Watch. And I do want to commend you for the work that you've had a consultant doing. I read all of the results that you had attached to the agenda, and I thought that it was very healthy in terms of your relationships and in terms of the norms that benefit both the council and staff. So thank you. Now to my remarks. Earth Day this past weekend reminds us that the natural world, so magnificently embracing us here in the Santa Ynez Valley, shares both its measurable and immeasurable environmental and economic worth with us. In our anxiety to obtain as much economic benefit as possible, it is easy to forget that once we develop agricultural land for economic gain, we have destroyed its precious multiple contributions to human well-being forever. This is why We Watch stands firm in its position that the agricultural land on the west and the northeast, forming two of our village's gateways and green belts, should not be sacrificed in the dubious hope that it holds the economic answers to the city's need to diversify its base. We urge you to remove the potential SOI and annexation of this agricultural land from your 2018 goals list and focus on the many other creative alternatives for economic diversification available to you, including the current industrial SOI, which does hold economic promise. Our Water Issues Work Group has been studying the history and current water supply and management issues in the valley and beyond for more than the past year. We agree that you need a goal addressing water. We do not think water independence is an achievable goal, given our dependence on state water. We think water sustainability may be achievable. Rather than a vague objective saying provide ongoing education to customers, we recommend provide education and incentives that achieve needed water conservation. Water conservation, along with ultra-purification of wastewater and stormwater, will be needed to achieve sustainability. Investigation of the latter sources needs to continue and accelerate. So I would suggest that you might want to have an objective in that area. Solvang is long overdue for the emergence of a new vision.
Are you about done, Nancy?
Almost. Arriving at it needs the voices of all its citizens. Walking and talking with Solvang residents the past few months, I realized there is a lot of angst about Solvang's quality of life issues, such as impacts of traffic problems on main and neighborhood streets, other intrusions into neighborhoods, water, housing. For some, there is anger with and fear of government, including the city. A visioning process as the first step in updating the general plan may be a cost-effective way to achieve and begin implementing a community-wide vision, provided all residents who are interested have the opportunity to meaningfully participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Hank Hamburg.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council members. Hank Hamburg, I'm a resident here in Solvang. And I'm fortunate enough to be off work today to attend this workshop that's supposed to be open to the public. I think a Saturday or a Sunday would be even better, or maybe even an evening when people get home from work. But nonetheless, I appreciate you considering the public input. Quite frankly, I'm a little bit dismayed, as Susan Bott is, about the sphere of influence even being 3 words that are on your proposed goals again. Your constituency came in here very loud and clear about the anti-growth of the city, and yet still we see it here. So if possible, I'd like to see a show of hands on who on council is actually in favor of this sphere of influence growth.
That'll be discussed later on today, Hank.
Okay, well, it would be nice if the public knew who these people who are representing us, how they actually vote on council. Another thing I agree with Susan Bott said about having any kind of growth of the city be thrown to the voters on a ballot initiative rather than being done by the Planning Commission and the council members. And also, the retired gentleman, respectfully, I don't see any writing happening with the 3 individuals who wrote or who expressed their views about the anti-sphere of influence or the annexing of the city of Solvang on his board so far. So I don't know if he has to catch up, but I'm just trying to make it so that he can just say we're not really in favor. Again, I'm very dismayed. We don't have the infrastructure. If the city's looking for money, I say get the people who should actually pay and get a free ride through the city. And I'm speaking of the massive amounts of tour buses that come in here with people from out of the area who use our water and our toilets and buy probably a moderate amount of product here in town, but for the most part it's a stop on the way from LA to San Francisco where they do a bathroom break, a quick walk, pictures, and then they're off again. Let's raise the TOT like Santa Barbara has. City of Santa Barbara basically runs off the TOT. If you need money, I would suggest highly to raise the TOT percentage to a more competitive rate instead of 2%. I would double that at least. And, excuse me? Or 12%, I would go to 15 then, raise it 2%. And then as far as parking goes in the city, everybody on the council, and I know the mayor is very much against paid parking in the city, but every community that has a tourist industry from San Diego to Eureka charges for parking. And I've never seen anything like it in the city of anywhere where free parking in a tourist area goes unfettered. That's a huge amount of dollars that we're missing out on. So if you really want to be fiscally conservative, don't hammer the people who live here and the residents with more traffic, more people, and a crowded infrastructure. Hammer the people who are coming here to visit and love to come to visit, I should mention. So I don't think parking's going to make a difference, but I don't think it should come on the backs of the residents anymore. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Hank. Rick is putting down things that are new to the discussion. What was brought up earlier is on the discussion table, so he's writing down new stuff, which you indicate right now is parking. So.
Okay, great.
John Camp, followed by Robert Hudson.
Thanks for making this open to the public. It would be great to have this on a Saturday or on an evening where more people can come in. I represent many of my neighbors, and we're concerned and we're scared that we're going to start construction outside the city limits, and it's going to change the character and the charm and the history of the city. And I think that if you travel around, which I'm sure a lot of you do, you will realize that there's no other place like this. And finding creative ways to get income, revenue, is really what should be the priority. When I hear that word construction, I know what that means. I've worked in construction, and it starts at one point and it moves a little farther and farther, and it tends to get out of control. I think that the citizens of this city would really appreciate the opportunity to have a vote on what the potential changes might be outside of this sphere of influence, or in that sphere of influence. A lot of cities do that. They fight over this with the contractors. They have plans. They go back and forth, and eventually it comes to a vote of the citizens. And I think we have a right to vote, not necessarily that it's going to go my way, but I think that's just I think it's a real considerate way to treat the citizens. There's not many here. There would be a real responsibility, not so much on the council, but on the actual residents to do what they feel is best. Not many. I can speak for myself only. I would be willing to pay higher taxes. I mean, I'd never thought I'd ever say that, but that would be one way to generate revenue. So I think if we can get creative and realize that construction outside the city limits would change this area forever, and we could never get it back. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert Hudson, followed by Sabine Overseen.
Mayor Richardson, council members, hello, my name is Robert Hudson. I'm a resident of Solvang. I believe before we get into new issues such as growth, and by the way, I agree with all the preceding comments. I'm very concerned about the possibility of growth. We moved here from Michigan, and we specifically picked this area because it's not overdeveloped. It hasn't had what we've seen happen in Camarillo and Goleta and so many other places where it's just a massive construction, strip malls, and it's just terrible, traffic and everything else. However, I would suggest also before we get into bike lanes and so forth, we consider that Solvang is a beautiful city, but yet I believe the beauty is being threatened right now somewhat due to a lack of code enforcement. We've called several times in a nice way. We don't like to harass our neighbors, but quite honestly, there are some appalling examples of code violations. It's really bad. And each time our response is, well, sorry, we don't have a code enforcement officer, which strikes me as absurd. How do you have a city and a code and you have CCNRs, but there's no enforcement? There's nobody to enforce it. And what I'm speaking about are multiple cases of trash cans being out, lawns being left to go, giant holes in the, now I'm a resident of Skip Mesa, so this is Skip Mesa, but we have seen some of this elsewhere as well. Giant hole in the ground sitting there, probably 4 feet across and maybe 4 feet deep for 2 years, with a lot totally undeveloped, even though somebody's living there, homes being used as warehouses. This is all going on. We have talked to Matt about it. We have raised some of these issues. But again, the answer is, well, we're sorry, you should maybe start a lawsuit. We don't think that's a very good response. So we would humbly ask that the council consider dealing with an existing situation before a real problem, which I think should be addressed, before we get into new areas and take on new projects. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Sabine Overson.
Hi, thank you so much for making this workshop. I came here very unprepared. I have strong ideas. As last time I was up here, I came from Denmark. Solvang is a beautiful town. We were living overseas for many, many years, and the only reason why I wanted to move to the States was to get to this little town. It's Danish, it's beautiful, it's American Danish or whatever. It has so many qualities. If you haven't been overseas, compare the differences, the good and the bad. This is a beautiful little town that needs to be kept up just the way it is. There's still many things missing, but I think those are often overlooked, like the bike lanes. It surprises me. My mom in the 1970s, she had her bike. She refused to have a car. She had me in a baby carriage in the back, got stopped by the police officer because she did not want a car. She wanted to keep her bike with her little baby carriage with me inside. And she rode on the separate bike path to her work, 3 miles there. What surprises me is this was in the 1970s. We are in 2018, and we don't have more than a mile and a half of bike lane. And I think this is often needed in this beautiful little town. The connection from the schools to the communities. There is no way, there's nothing on the ballot, there's nothing, no people, no one has a say unless you stand up here shaking like me, trying to have a voice that it is a desperate need for people to use a different way of transportation to get to home, to town, to school, to back and keep our children and families safe and make it a different option of transportation. And we have the most beautiful weather in town. I mean, in Central California or anywhere else. I can't see there's no stopping. I feel like this town is based on tourism. Everyone comes. We hear it around the world. People come from China and everywhere. In Denmark, we all know where Solvang is. We all want to go there. As a little child, I want to go to Solvang. And I'm proud to be part of this town now. And I would like to do whatever I can to keep it that way, to keep it simple and see it from a tourist perspective. I was 3 years ago, or 7 years ago. I would like to keep it that way and keep it small, no annexation, no development, because I think we need to fix the problems we already have occurring, like bike path is missing, we don't have them. Instead of just building it up, it's going to take our tourism away, and we're going to be just like Lompoc or Santa Barbara. It's going to change, and we're going to lose tourism.
Thank you, Sullivan.
Thank you.
Chuck Stacy, followed by Pat Sullivan. Chuck? Did we wake you?
You know, I've lived here longer than anybody up there. Now, beat you. I beat you. I beat you. I beat you. You're right, yeah. And I've been riding bicycles all my life because I have no feeling in the bottom part of my legs. That's why I lumber. But that's when I found a bicycle, I found freedom. And Solvang for years was a wonderful place, you know. But do I ride out Alamo Potato? No, hell, I'm no fool. Furthermore, the roads aren't kept up. But her point, I didn't come to talk about that, but you know, I can do that any day, and I will, because you know, I go shopping down at Nielsen's, and I got bags on my front and the back of my bike, and I take great delight coming out of Nielsen's with a full load of groceries, and I beat the traffic from that end to that end. They don't catch up with me. I make them better time. There's a lot of space in this town with some imagination for a change to do what she's talking. If we're going to be Danish, let's be Danish. You been to Denmark? Good beer, good bikes, you know? And so why not be Danish? Why not be Danish? And you get right now hordes of bicycle people coming in here. I wish they'd stay away. There are too many of them. But, but be that as it may, they're here. And, you know, that's a good industry. You know, now when we got lots of things going on, but I think it's really important to stay in touch. And I thought you were going to talk about the annexation. I'm against that. I think the city's big enough, and we have enough challenges dealing with what we got now. But on the other hand, I don't want to see somebody come up with sizes, you know, huge buildings from that city down the road. We don't need to do that. I mean, there has been no consideration at all, I don't think, there. And so I think thinking, and most of all, to keep conversation going. I think that's really critical, especially in a time of change, and this is a time of change. But I would hope in all considerations bike lanes be looked at, not for people with these new automated bikes. I think they're horrible, and they can go too fast, but especially as an alternative way around town. Also, I think a lot of the streets are kind of crazy. The one in back here, that runs parallel. I don't know why there aren't wrecks down there every day. And then you should just stand on those corners and see people trying to get around town now. You know, they don't go down there. They cut through the back lanes. And I think that's something we ought to look to. Speed bumps, horrible things. But, you know, hey, that's cheap. It's cheaper than paying for somebody in the hospital. I think there's a lot of ways to be real imaginative and go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Chuck. Pat Sullivan?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Here we are again. Last time that, or maybe there's been some issues since then, but several months ago, this item came up at the evening meal, at the evening meeting. And I spoke at that time saying, why don't you send out just a postcard to see how people are interested who live in the area? That should be your main concern. How do they feel about it? Well, I don't think that's been done. And I'd like to know, how much have you budgeted for this study? Which, if you're looking for revenue, I think this is a really poor way of spending taxpayers' money when so many people who vote don't want it. Can you tell us now how much the budget was for this study? Yes. The annexation study. No, the annexation.
We paid up to $40,000 for the annexation study.
Okay. And how much would a postcard mail out asking for people's opinion have cost? Did anyone look at that?
If you recall, the night that you spoke, we canceled the annexation study, so we haven't done anything on it since that time.
But apparently it's still on the board. Okay. In this study, whichever one you're talking about, have you looked at the trade-offs for the increased cost for policing the area, for schools, for road work? When I came here in '74, Solvang was a little town 3/4 of a mile away. Now we share a common property line, which I find very distressing. To get out onto the highway, it takes a kind person that will stop and hold traffic. And I try not to go out after 2 o'clock, otherwise you have the high schools, and asking them to stop and hold traffic is an oxymoron. Anyway, I thank you for your time. I hope something positive will come from this.
Thank you, Pat. I have no other speaker slips at this time, Anyone else would like to speak? Susan?
Susan Williams. I'm a resident and a business owner in the city of Solvang. I would like to see the city council explore having a Solvang's own smoking ordinance. Currently,
Yeah.
okay, can you hear me? Yes, I'd like to see Solvang look into a more restrictive smoking ordinance. Currently, we follow state law. The city of Solvang, I'm sorry, the city of Santa Barbara, Carpinteria, the county of Santa Barbara, and Buellton all have a lot more restrictions than we do. Last summer, I was enjoying one of the concerts at the park, and there were two gentlemen smoking cigars. The cigar smoke was wafting over to where we were sitting and was rather obnoxious. I've had cigarette smokers there, but that wasn't quite as bad. But anyway, I did go over to the gentleman and ask them nicely if they could please stop smoking, and they did. But when I came home, I was shocked to find out that you can smoke in a public area. You can smoke in the park. You can smoke in recreation areas in Solvang. So I would like to see a lot more restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Is there anyone else? Mark?
Thank you. City Council members, Mark and Fonti, Solvang resident. There's a couple of things I wanted to say real quickly. First off, I like this. This is a great process, and it's something that's necessary. The City Council needs to know what this town is going to be like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. To do that, you need studies of what's going on. Your sphere of influence study was a great idea. I'm not sure it was done as well as I would have liked to have seen it. So I'd like to see a study that actually talked about a lot more alternatives than what we saw in that sphere of influence study. One of the things that concerns me is, as contrary to many of the people here, the sphere of influence study doesn't mean we're automatically going to annex anything. The traffic is an issue that comes from Buellton, and it comes from the Chumash Casino, and we get stuck in the middle. And so you've already got a bypass as an objective, and I think that's a wonderful idea. Cut down the traffic. I don't want to see a tremendous amount of growth in the city, but I want to understand, and I think you as the city council need to understand where our boundaries are and what our limitations are. Right now in Santa Barbara, AG1, that is property that is agricultural grade, what is it, agricultural grade 1, zone 1, is available for cannabis production. Okay? That's what's on the two areas that were in the sphere of influence on both sides of us. If we don't have control over that, that can be done without anything we can say about it, and that's a concern. San Ynez Community Services is looking at the property on the east side for one of their waste reclamation plants, water reclamation plants, waste treatment plants. And on the roadside, right near wells that we have. I don't think that everybody understands, and so I would like to suggest that the city make it obvious to the city members, residents, what it is we're trying to accomplish. That was never established when the sphere of influence was done. Why are we doing this? So as a goal, let's be better communicators about what it is we're trying to achieve. Yeah, there was something about revenue and something about this and something about that. Understand, it's all up here. You've got a lot of it. But we never really said that we need to understand where we're going and what controls over the edge of the city we should have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is there anyone else? You already spoke.
I want to clarify things.
I'm sorry. Come on, you. Tracy.
Good afternoon, residents, City Council. Tracy Farhad, Executive Director of the Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau. I'm not a resident, but I do work here in the city limits. First of all, I just want to say thank you for reinvesting in Solvang's #1 tourism industry and the #1 industry for Solvang. With over 98 million in visitors spending on an annual basis, Tourism promotion continues to deliver $13 back for every dollar that you invest, which brings it back to the residents and the businesses here. And of course, that's through really focusing on your midweek and your off-season as well to keep that lifestyle going. So with over 55% of the city's general fund being contributed to by tourism promotion, residents continue to enjoy the benefits of having a travel destination as their economic driver. So, and that even includes an estimated $1,400 in tax savings per family per year. So thank you for keeping tourism promotion top priority for the city, and the CVB is your proud partner in supporting the chosen lifestyle of the residents and for the goals of the city. And I would just like to say as an after that I just read about the bypass, and I'd be very concerned about that because of how far off we're already off of freeway, just for considering how people find us and not scooting by. We like them to go slowly, just not too slowly. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing none, then we'll come back to the next item on the agenda. Rick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I move on to the next agenda item, what I thought I would do is do some clarification. The goals that we have behind me right here on butcher block paper on the wall, they're not in any prioritization order. If you take a look at them, even though annexation, the annexation study is the first one, A1, that's because the first word says address future growth. So it's A1. Next one is benefit to the community. It's B1. You'll notice that my proposed goals that I have here, they're all Ps from the public. So the public's testimony. So there is no prioritization order as far as the annexation is concerned. In talking to individual council members, there was a concern to address the annexation study. Not necessarily to go forward with it, but just to reassess it and readdress it from a communication standpoint. The need is to do a visioning exercise before any annexation comes forward. That is the third bullet, engage in public outreach for future visioning process. That was mentioned during the course of my discussions with the council, that to get out in front of it from a visioning perspective first. One of the last speakers mentioned he wanted more communication if you're going to be pursuing an annexation study. Another speaker talked about having postcards sent out. You may, as an option, have another bullet underneath there that says that more communication would be desired if the council so chooses to go forward on a annexation. The reason why I did not put no annexation study up there is because it's counterintuitive. If you have a goal and it doesn't get the majority of the city council, you would be wasting your prioritization dots to put it on another goal that says don't pursue an annexation study. Two of the speakers came forward asking for bike lanes. Those are addressed in goal E1, so that's why I didn't put it up there on that one. One of the speakers came forward indicating a creative tax revenue measure. I put that down as P3. When we get further along in talking about the goals, consideration could be given to either let that stand on its own as a creative tax revenue or put it under I1. I1 talks about improving the city's finances, and that could be another bullet underneath that sub-goal. So that's my response as far as the items on the public comment, Mr. Mayor. The agenda for tonight's workshop, we already went over the introductory comments, the public comments. We'll be reviewing the agenda and the ground rules for this afternoon, talking about norms, the type of norms that we have between council and staff and amongst council members. We'll also be discussing the accomplishments and the challenges that each one of the council members indicated that they felt proud about as far as the accomplishments, and wanted to put challenges up there just so it's on staff's radar, what to anticipate, what some of the concerns are of the city council. We'll talk about a status of the existing goals. Your city manager will be giving you an oral report as far as the status of the existing 2017-18 goals. And then we will be discussing the proposed goals that are before you, finalizing them, and then we'll go with the goal study exercise. So in talking about ground rules, one of the things that's helpful in these types of workshops is to come up with a consensus as far as what the ground rules should be for the city council in your deliberations. One of the first ones is to respect each other's opinions as far as your colleagues on the dais. Another one would be what I refer to as a parking lot or a bike rack issue. There could be items during your deliberations that come up that really are not a goal, but you would like city staff to follow up on. I would put that on one of the blank boards as a bike rack, that idea, for further follow-up. You wouldn't be able to address it this evening, but staff would be able to address it down the road. Any suggestions received during the public comment portion, the ones that I listed there, if they receive 3 or more votes, then they would be also identified as goals for council's consideration when you do your prioritization exercise. Once a goal is reviewed, because we will be going over each one of the goals, clarifying what they are, so everyone has an understanding as to what you would be voting on. Once that is finalized, we would be moving forward on the prioritization. And then finally, 1 dot per goal per council member. Council members during the prioritization will be giving 5 dots. I have them right here. They're green dots and yellow dots. You would be putting a green dot on which you feel would be the top 5 goals you would like city staff to address in 18-19. The yellow dots, you'll be given 2 yellow dots. Those are priorities of the city council, not necessarily a goal, but a priority of those lists that you would like staff to address and also your colleagues to consider when they're addressing the goals. Anything that has 3 green dots is a consensus of the city council would be one of the final goals. Anything that has 2 green dots and 2 yellow dots would also be a consensus of the city council to move forward as another echelon of goals from that perspective. So discussion of the norms. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, are we looking, this is working out, okay. When you describe the goals, a goal then is A1 and then the other things underneath it?
Yes,
or
ma'am.
an explanation of it?
Yes, that would be encapsulated within that goal.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So before we move off of the ground rules, is there a consensus on the council that we could live with those ground rules for the exercise for this evening?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I just had one technical clarification. So you're basically saying, so if someone wanted to support a goal, and I'll use A1 again as an example, you would have to put the dot next to A1?
It's just A1. And because the idea is they are grouped together. If you take a look at some of the other goals, for example, E2, revisit the overall city policy of the contributions to outside agencies. But then also there's another idea that someone had on the city council, and that was allocate 2% of the TOT towards those also.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you want to put 2%, but you do want to support E2 so you can have a discussion at a later time at a council meeting regarding, 1, contributions towards the nonprofits, and then 2, what is the financing source to fund those contributions and grants.
Okay, so if I was in support of the use of the 2% TOT bullet point, I would still need to put my green sticker next to E2 as a whole.
Yes. Yeah. Now, when because I can tell from the line of discussion, annexation is going to be one of the controversial items. Addressing A1 does not say tonight that you are pursuing an annexation study or a sphere of influence What it means is that you want to make this a priority for discussions at a later council meeting, to have further discussions and further input from the public on that matter. So it's a important goal, is to discuss it. You're not making up a determination right now whether or not you're pursuing it or not. You just want to have that discussion at a future council meeting. Does that clarify that item?
I have a question about the annexation aspect. What if we just want to look at what is the existing SOI? We really don't want to expand it. How do we work that into A1?
So I think what I'm seeing here is that a council member might support one of these sub goals, but not want to put a green dot next to the main goal, just because they don't. It looks like you're supporting every part of it as it is.
Okay. Well, on the, we can work, when we get to the language of the goals, we can work on the language to have you feel more comfortable. That way you can support it. And if you want to break them apart,
or take our green sticker back.
Yeah, we can break them apart. Okay. Yes.
Don't press it real hard.
Yeah, but as far as the goals for the ground rules, that would be something that we could live by for this afternoon then.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So you're suggesting that we may subdivide those goals and put the green stickers on the subdivision of the goal?
No.
Yes.
Oh. No.
No. You still would need to put it on the main goal, but then later on in discussion, under consensus, we could rearrange how it's worded. Or for example, we could drop.
It would still enhance the quality, as for example, E2, we would still discuss the enhance the quality of life in Solvang, whether or not the other sub-paragraphs are included.
We could drop the second sub and then
we could add another one.
However you want to do it, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So moving on to the discussion of the norms. Again, to be an effective working group, to be an effective city council, you need to have good working relations with each other and with city staff. Norms are behaviors that are clearly established that people seem to agree on as far as the working relationships. What expectations does city council members have of city staff will be discussed, what city staff needs from city council members, and then also what council members need from each other to be an effective working group. Now, the caveat here is what I'm going to list is not necessarily a consensus of the entire city council or the entire staff, but their opinions, individual opinions that each member of the city council had or each member of staff had, and I documented them for that purpose. So you have an idea as to what they would be. Expectations that the city council has of staff: to be professional, positive, optimistic, have good interface with the public, essentially have good customer service skills. Respond to the city council and to the public in a timely manner with complete information. Provide financial information as transparent as possible with backup information to sustain facts. Have quarterly or semi-annual updates on city goals and finances. Let council members know as soon as possible regarding important matters, controversial or politically sensitive issues, when staff becomes aware of them. What I'm doing here is I'm just illustrating the intentions that the city council has of city staff. That's not to say that staff is not doing any of these or they're doing all of them. It's just what the expectations are. If there's any clarification that anybody needs throughout the course of these discussions, please let me know. And when providing information, provide it in a full disclosure manner, giving council what they need to know versus what staff would like them to know. When council members ask questions of staff regarding specific agenda items prior to the council meetings, and staff responds back to council members in an email specifically with the requested information, should that information be of interest to the rest of the city council, then as a courtesy, the council member would like staff to send that information to all council members. Now, having said that, and the city attorney will be quick to chime in on this, it's one-way communication from staff to the city council. Respectfully request never reply back to all, because then that creates a Brown Act violation from that perspective.
But we do that currently.
Yes.
The reply to all part, or the?
Oh, there we
No. Yeah.
Some of us don't.
Have a clear and open line of communication between council and staff. Also, a mutual respect for one another. When discussing items, look not only at the current financial impacts, but also at the long-range financial impacts. And what that was like if you're making a presentation and it's 3/4 of the fiscal year and you're recommending to hire a part-time position and it's costing $10,000, well, that's $10,000 in the current impact. However, the future implication is that will be a $40,000 position going forward. And then be transparent to the public, help educate them when they don't understand the reasoning behind decisions or policies. That is an issue that happens throughout local government, at the county level and the city level. And that is, as public servants, part of the process is an enforcement of ordinances, but then you also need to educate the public as to why we are enforcing those ordinances. To provide counsel at the end of each council meeting with a list of items for the next city council meeting, as well as listing the upcoming community events. My understanding is that you do get a calendar at the end of the meeting listing what is going to be on the future agendas, but I think there is a desire to have the big items that are coming before the city council announced at the council meeting, so members of the public also realize what's going to be coming forward before the city council. Yeah. It was expressed to possibly have a Brown Act training to help educate all council members on the nuances regarding the Brown Act. Yes. Yeah. You have to every 2 years. Provide well-rounded staff reports, short and concise, professional presentations, not too winded, and the request was please do not read them verbatim from the staff report. Pretty much the Cliff Notes version when you're making an oral presentation. And then accurate financial information. What does staff need from the city council? The request to work through the city manager. If you have any operational type of questions, that's a normal process that is used in other city council, city manager relations throughout the state. That council provides staff with questions regarding agenda items in advance of the city council meeting. That provides staff an opportunity to get them the information they need at that agenda. Understand a lot of times constituents ask council members questions and they like them to ask them those questions at the council meeting. Even though staff gets them back that information, they realize that they want to ask that question still at the council meeting, so the public hears what the answer is as well too. Have routine, periodic one-on-one individual meetings with council members to apprise them of the current affairs. Understand that the city has a small staff. It's remarkable what you're able to accomplish and the beauty that your city has with the limited staff that you do have, especially given the consideration of how many tourists come through here. It's a very clean community. To be consistent with expectations and direction given to staff. And in light of the increasing pension-related costs, for council to stay on course to systematically address the rising costs over time, which are surmountable. I will note that cities and counties throughout the state of California are dealing with rising pension costs. Some of them are insurmountable. However, since Solvang does not have a police and fire department and you contract out for public safety services, your costs aren't as insurmountable as other cities are. So you are in a better position from that perspective, looking at it from the outside. what do you council members need from each other? Again, this is a compilation as to what a number of the various colleagues on the city council came up with, and I tried to take it down as verbatim as I could. Come to council meetings prepared, having read the agenda reports, ask questions of staff regarding the agenda prior to the meeting. Again, it goes towards trying to get as much information done prior to the meeting as far as answering the questions. When you come to council meetings, please come with an open mind. Wait until decisions on the agenda are made after hearing staff reports, listening to members of the public, and the thoughts of your fellow council members. Be respectful of other council members' comments, and should council members disagree with one another, to do so in a respectful and professional manner. To have more engagement and dialogue on the dais in an effort to understand where everyone on the council stands on certain issues, especially when someone disagrees on an item. This is a very common request that council members have. A lot of times you'll end up with a 4-1 vote or a 3-2 vote, but you don't understand where your colleagues are coming from. And so the request was to have a little bit more dialogue from that perspective. Be respectful, professional, congenial to one another on the dais, valuing their opinions and perspectives, knowing that it's okay to agree to disagree as long as it's done in a professional manner. For council members to respond back in a timely manner to their fellow council members when they leave an email or phone message, similar to when the expectation is of staff to get back to council in a timely manner. Council members would like to get requesting that their fellow colleagues would get back to them when they leave messages as well too. Work through the city manager and try not to micromanage staff. Engage community members outside of council meetings to get their opinions on city-related matters. That's where the democracy and the representation comes forward. Council members that are on other boards present what the status is of their boards at the end of the council meetings, so the public is aware of city-related matters. I did notice your council list the members that are on other boards outside, and so continuation of that process would be good. Be mindful that the mayor has to run an orderly meeting in the interest of decorum. Please try not to interrupt each other. Makes it difficult on the mayor from that perspective. Do not engage members of the public in dialogues during the public comment session. That's primarily a Brown Act issue. The suggestion would be if council wants to follow up with a member of the public to possibly have staff address their concerns after the meeting. Be consistent in providing all members of the public with the same amount of time, make their comments. Wait until after public testimony before stating your position on an issue. When public input portion of the council meeting has concluded, move on to the next council deliberations and try not to reopen the item for additional public comments because that portion was off. That seemed to be something that council would like to continue to do, is to move forward, talk about the matters when it's public comment, but then move forward from there. And then be supportive of community events, fundraisers, by attending and participating in them as you're an ambassador of the city. Acknowledge that the monthly city council stipends need to be adjusted in order to attract more candidates to run for council. This is a concern that cities throughout the state of California find because they don't adjust their stipends on a routine basis, and so they fall behind, and then it's a big adjustment when they do need to. So it's always good to take a look at that whenever you have a population change from a census perspective. And then acknowledge that the local economy and the local environment is changing. That the wine industry and bicycling is starting to become very popular, not only amongst residents, but also amongst tourists. To be more open to new events as opportunities to be successful rather than staying firm to the traditional events, and to realize that a changing economy requires council members to think outside the box and to be flexible to open to more various community events and venues. Any questions on any of those comments before we move on to accomplishments? Okay, so I apologize for the small type, but I try to get it all on one page here. On the accomplishments, again, this is a summary of responses that I received from council and from city staff. No water rate increases, and improved water management practices have been implemented. Progress has been made on the wastewater treatment plant study. There's a cooperative working relationship with the San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians, resulting in a new fire ladder truck to the community. That is significant. The city of Santa Maria that I recently retired from, we're in the process of securing a ladder truck. That's about a $1.2 million piece of equipment apparatus. To put it in perspective, $1 million is a lot, but if you have sales tax, that's your driving force, you would have to have $100 million in gross sales to generate enough for that ladder truck. So when you think about it, $100 million in gross sales you would need for the ladder truck, that's a big accomplishment.
I'd like to comment on that right now. It's there's folks in the valley that don't appreciate the tribe, but certainly they should appreciate the fact that the tribe is put that ladder truck within the city limits of Solvang for us to use to protect our citizens, and it's well appreciated, and I think everybody should be aware of that.
The aesthetics that have been done on the process of undergrounding power lines, funding for a new study on the Sunnyfield Spur options is another accomplishment. Support of the San Ynez Valley Bicycle Master Plan by the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments is one step towards enhancing the bicycling community. The city is better off financially than other cities right now. Water's a big issue. Getting the Well 22 online was a major accomplishment. And the willingness to work with ID1 and to actually open up dialogues with them on water issues is an accomplishment. And then improved city council member relations and a willingness to work together and to value other council members' opinions. That's another accomplishment from a work relations standpoint. The Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau continues to bring in tourists. It's very well run. The city's working very cooperatively with the Solvang Chamber of Commerce, bringing to fruition and extending the life of the San Ynez Valley Tourism Business Improvement District, doing business as Visit the San Ynez Valley. Ability to maintain pleasant pedestrian-friendly walking is an accomplishment given your limited staffing resources. It was noted that you were able to collaborate and save the Danish Inn, the new Solvang Brewery windmill. Public art around the city, something that is a recent accomplishment. More diversified city council members with younger members now on the council.
I don't know if that's good or not.
Numerous successful community events that have happened within Solvang. Car shows, Danish days, parades. And then this was a little while ago, but you did get Caltrans installed two, right turn arrows on Highway 246. So switching gears, challenges facing the city. We did talk a little bit about the unfunded OPEB and pension-related benefits. The the concern here was you needed to provide the public with more education as to how the city's facing those challenges. Addressing the impact of the legalization of cannabis. It was noted that 246 is congested, Highway 246. However, it's congested based also on what the neighbors to the east and the west do. And so with the legalization of cannabis, Solvang can have all their ducks in a row, but it also deals with what the county does, and then also what the city of Buellton does as far as its impact to Solvang. Deferring capital projects and an aging water resource infrastructure. Adequately securing future water resources in an effort to get water independence beyond state water. Traffic concerns along 246. We heard tonight a lot of automobiles. Taking too much financial liability, taking on staff without having offsetting revenues could be another challenge facing the city in the future. The need to update the city's general plan will be a challenge. It's a lengthy process and a time-consuming one and a costly one. Ensuring that the spending on the Solvang Visitors and Convention Bureau is commensurate with the increase in sales and TOT receipts. There's a lot of money that's going out, and the concern is the increase in sales and TOT receipts commensurate. Another challenge is the need to be open to ideas beyond the traditional Danish themed events, taking a look at more like bicycle type of activities and festivals. And educating the public on how tourism actually helps the city. You are a tourist community. Tourism is the lifeblood of the general plan, or excuse me, the general fund. So, I mean, you're able to do a lot of things in the city because of the tourism industry that provides money to the city in their spending. So that concludes the list of challenges facing the city. Before we move on to the status of the existing goals, does any comments from council?
You know, you mentioned cannabis. I'm wondering if we might want to consider some sort of a cooperative agreement or discussion between Buellton and ourselves regarding cannabis. If we could set up some sort of a MOU or something like that, would that be an appropriate thing to discuss?
County.
You mean in being able to resist what may happen in the county? In that regards, is that?
Well, no. That both Buellton and Solvang look at the cannabis issue on the same level. Otherwise, if we say there'll be no smoking of cannabis in the city, both cities should do that kind of thing, so that we can agree to have a unified stance on cannabis within at least our portion of the valley.
Well, a lot of the regulation is going to be at the state level. Smoking in public is already prohibited. You would have certain restrictions that you could impose at a more local level as long as they're not in conflict with the state. But working cooperatively between the two agencies.
I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say is we have an emergency ordinance in effect right now. Let's ask Buellton to have an ordinance that reflects our ordinance, or we should have one that reflects theirs. So we both have the same position of cannabis within our area.
I think Buellton's working towards the same as our ordinance.
I think we ought to have a discussion between us so that we can agree.
Well, you have cannabis on your next agenda for discussion, and I believe Buellton is close to doing theirs also. So we definitely could pass the information on to them as what we're doing.
It wouldn't benefit us for Buellton to have an ordinance that would influence what happens in our city that we don't want to be influenced. So if we have the same kind of a
well, you have a whole county out there, though, Jim. We are surrounded by county lands where that's going to be allowed. So
right, but we can still we don't want to end up the way Lompoc is. That's my objection. So, and any way that we can do to sidestep that problem it'd be beneficial, I think.
Okay, as we move on, then we'll be talking about the status of the existing goals, and that oral presentation will be given by your city manager.
Yeah, you have the staff report in your packet, but I'll go through those quickly here. Goal number 1 was the work towards water independence. The contract, as you know, for development of well number 22 in Creekside is in progress. We expect to have that in operation in February. We continue to work on the Riverwell permit settlement issues with ID1, the LSL Ranch, and on our state petition. That's still, negotiations are ongoing. Our water supply management plan is nearing its completion. Phase 1 of the meter replacement is completed. Phase 2 is nearing completion, and then Phase 3 will be scheduled for next year. Initial exchange agreement with ID1 was implemented. We did a little exchange with State Water. We're working towards a more permanent agreement on that. You've created an ad hoc committee for that. Preliminary water softening study was completed. The wastewater treatment plant upgrade study is in progress and includes an evaluation of recycled water as a source of supply. And then, as mentioned, water rates were maintained for 2017, water and sewer, with no increases. Under improved traffic circulation, the construction contract for the crosswalks and intersection improvements along Mission Drive has been awarded, and construction is scheduled to be completed by August of this year. And that's part of those Mission Drive improvements you did with your circulation study a couple of years ago. Number 3 was enhance the profitability and desirability of the TRC, economic development. One of those was a parking plan, and Solvang School has indicated approval of the public parking lot. We actually now have a signed agreement. We'll have that on the next agenda for you to approve that, to allow public parking and off hours of the school at the school parking lot. And the city also has purchased the vacant lot across the street here from City Hall, with the plan for a future public parking lot there in the next couple of years. Under Parks and Recreation, no work has been done since the Solvang Parks and Rec Commission voted not to pursue the valley-wide authority. And also no work has been done on the a youth center or a community center. There is potential for putting some acquisition of new recreational property in our 10-year plan. We will put that out in our next CIP. 5 was to maintain and improve intergovernmental relations. The city continues to try and maintain positive relationships with governmental agencies in the valley, mainly with the use of ad hoc city council committees. The city had recently, as I mentioned, also they have the ID1 committee, but we also have the library ad hoc subcommittee to discuss funding of both the Solvang and Bealton libraries with the city of Bealton. Under emergency plan, staff continues to participate in countywide manager meetings and discuss disaster response scenarios at our monthly meeting with our division heads and senior staff. And this will be the year that we update our emergency operations plan 2018. It is due, and their city clerk will be handling that task admirably. Support tourism industry. The city council provided $760,000 in promotion fundings to the SCVB in the last fiscal year. And you continue to get regular updates on the use of those funds, and city staff does review their financial statements monthly, and your auditor does it on an annual basis. Enhanced quality of life. The city website includes online Parks and Rec registration now, employment applications, and credit card payments for utilities. And with completion of the short-range transit plan update, an express route was created to provide for better performance, with a goal to enhance ridership and reduce operating costs. Under maintain quality staff, all departments continue to provide and budget for training annually, and the bulk of our employees are using that. Under evaluate capital needs, as you know, the city annually updates its 10-year plan, capital improvement plan, which includes pavement maintenance. A study is in process to evaluate options to connect Sunnyfields Park with a Class 1 bike trail on Mission Drive that ends near Alamo and Potato Creek. And also the South Alisal Road Bicycle Lane project is being added to the capital improvement plan in conjunction with the pavement management project from Alisal Bridge to the southern city limits. And under improved financial stability, currently you have $10.4 million in your general fund reserves, with $4.1 available for emergencies and $5.8 million available for the city's council's discretion. Employee contract negotiations have resulted in employees contributing 8% of the city's ongoing pension contributions. Over the last 3 years, you negotiated that. And the city is contributing to a trust with the CalPERS for post or OPEB or other post-employment benefits to reduce those liabilities for future medical retiree benefits. And then under future growth, the City Council approved a contract for a study of the SOI expansion and possible annexation. Recently, the Council voted not to continue with the financial analysis portion of that study. And then this workshop provides for the public's opportunity to engage in the envisioning process. So those are a real snapshot of your goals and what's been accomplished over the last year. And I'm available for any questions if you have any.
Having not heard any questions, we will go on to the next section of the workshop this evening. And this is the...
Rick?
Yes, sir.
I've been asked that we take a quick break.
Okay.
At this point for about 10 minutes or so.
That's fine.
We're back at 4:30.
Great.
Thank you.
My understanding is once a city annexes any property,
we're going to go on to proposed goals. We unfortunately had one, since it's a public workshop, we had an individual arrive late in the scene and would like to make a public comment. So Chris, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Chris Dearness. I'm a resident of Solvang. Thank you, Council, for doing this. This is really, really important to everybody, and I can't wait to see more of this going forward. I think everybody's voice is important. This is the best way, best forum to capture that. And I agree. If we could do this on the weekend, it would be better. So, anyway, the reason why I came up here is because one of the things that could and should be discussed is the importance of technology as an infrastructure going forward for the city of Solvang. There's so many things that we could do with this. For example, it could become a source of income, which would fall under creating economic diversity. It could fall under quality of life in terms of improving communication via public Wi-Fi. I know a lot of people here in the community may or may not have Wi-Fi. Over at the library, I found they had these little devices that they would check out to people who couldn't afford Wi-Fi. But in this case, this would give them an opportunity to participate in that. And that creates a digital economy for the city of Solvang, in which case people could stay at home and actually come up with some new entrepreneurial ideas working from home just because they have access to the digital economy. That's a whole other subject, and all this stuff falls under the idea of smart cities. Another example of this would be traffic improvement. One of the things that Smart Cities does is it keeps track of it with cameras and things like this. It keeps track of the traffic going through a city, whether it's public transportation or government operations or just regular traffic, tourism and buses and things like this. With the cameras or other devices, we can track all this stuff and figure out where's the traffic posing the biggest problem. How do we fix that? Same thing applies to surveillance. Instead of having a policeman on every corner, we could have cameras basically that would watch and make sure that the tourists are safe, that the residents are safe. So there's a lot of things that we could be doing both to earn money and to improve the quality of life, but we need to start thinking about this as a long-term infrastructure investment because it's not going to happen overnight. The technology is still evolving, and it may be best done as a public-private partnership. So all these things should be studied, and I know it's going to be tough, but that's why we're here in this type of a format. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. So Rick will add that as a public proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Going back on the agenda, the proposed goals, this is the time in which we identify and we finalize the wording on each one of the goals. That way you know what you're voting on. And then at the end, I will go over the proposed goals that we received from the public and make some suggestions and see if there's consensus on council as to adding them either to stand alone or adding them under a couple of these other goals. So the first one seems to be the one that we heard a lot of the discussion about, and that is goal A1. Address future growth issues, modify and update the general plan to expand the sphere of influence, pursue a possible annexation study, engage in public outreach for a future visioning process. After hearing from members of the public, one of the things I need to say is in listening to the goals of the City Council, it was onerous on me to try to categorize them and try to group them together. So, you have roughly about 15 goals in front of you. You very easily could have had 50 goals in front of you, but my goal was to try to group them together. I tried grouping this one together as well, too, in grouping the general plan along with the sphere of influence and the possible annexations because they dealt with growth issues. But that's not to say that you can't split A1 apart and have possibly 2 goals out of A1. It could be A1 address the future growth issues, and then the 2 bullets underneath that would be engage in public outreach for future visioning process, and then 2, modify and update the general plan. That could be A1. A2 could be address future growth issues, and it would be rather than say expand the sphere of influence, because I've heard from members of the public, you may want to say examine the existing sphere of influence. And then the second bullet would be pursue a possible annexation study. And then the third bullet would be, again, engage in public outreach for future visioning processes.
Well, let me ask the council a question on that. Do you want to see that modified, or do you want to see it left alone?
I'd like to see it modified from expand sphere of influence to examine our current sphere of influence.
So just to modify that first bullet point then. As far as keeping it, the 3 bullet points under A1,
Yes,
is
yeah.
all right?
Instead of expand, because that does seem to be a real concern for the public. I think we really need to get a handle on what we're doing with areas that are currently under our sphere of influence.
Agreed? Agreed? There you go, Rick.
Okay.
Change the wording. So we'll keep the 3 bullet points under A1. Just change the wording of the first bullet point.
Except you could maybe add, pursue possible annexation study of the present sphere of influence instead of annexation.
I think that was talked about in C1. Annex properties for the light industrial uses. That's part of that. Okay.
So while we're talking about A1, would this be a time to consider public input in what was said and how we word these, or are we going to come back to these? Or
these are the goals that we're setting for ourselves, and the public has had a chance to tell us what they want. Mm-hmm. We have to decide what we want on this.
Yeah, I think at the end of this, you'll end up with X number of goals, and then what you'd want to do is agendize those at the city council, probably individually, right, to focus that more refinement of those objectives in that.
Yes.
We aren't going to solve the goals. We're just trying to set up some goals.
Okay.
So the modification that we have on goal A1 is address future growth issues. And the first bullet would say modify and update the general plan to examine the existing sphere of influence. Pursue a possible annexation study of the current sphere of influence, and engage in public outreach for future visioning process.
So, and wouldn't visioning process typically be something that would precede the first 2?
Yes.
So it'd be better to...
Yes, it's not in any prioritization order, but I could put that like a...
as number 1.
Number 1, to help you out, yeah. I'll put it under it. 1, 2, 3.
And would there be any consideration to add, consider urban growth boundaries?
That probably would come under when we engage the public outreach for future visioning.
Okay.
I'm sure that definitely would come up because that's very important.
Moving along to item number 2, benefit to the community at large would be to identify funding options to finance the state-mandated stormwater management program. Fine with that wording? Number 3, create economic diversity, augment the tourist industry with development, annex properties in the sphere for light industrial uses, educate the public on the need for economic diversity. Fine on.
I don't think I don't like C1 at all.
Oh.
Well, I mean, it doesn't, it confuses
It
A1.
almost seems like some of the subcategories of that could possibly be condensed and put underneath A1.
The A1 is taking a look at the general plan and taking a look at the sphere. The economic diversity is taking a look at something other than just tourism from an economic development standpoint.
Is there any clarification on what is really meant by the statement augment tourism industry with development?
And what does that mean?
Yeah.
Basically saying that tourism industry is the lifeblood. This is what I'm getting. Tourism industry is the lifeblood of the general fund. However, you also need to start looking at development, infill development, to also help out.
So maybe we need to rephrase that, like more cost-effective infill.
In my viewpoint is that tourism may start a downtrack. If tourism starts downtracking, we have to keep the finances of the city going, and the way to do that would be to back it up with another industry or another some sort of a financial, some sort of a development, not necessarily development in the sense of building infrastructure, but another industry to help support us should tourism fall.
And I think a perfect example of that was when they had the debris flow in Montecito, and you could park any place you wanted to in the city of Solvang.
Right, yeah.
Every weekend, every day. I mean, the city was dead, and I know that the shop owners lost a lot of money, and so did the hotels and motels.
So augment means add to. So I think that's perfectly.
But like infill or a new development somewhere else.
No, like if we call it tourism, let's call it manufacturing, or let's call it clean manufacturing.
So manufacturing in downtown Solvang as an infill, or
within the city limits.
Okay.
That has to be determined during the discussion, not at this time. This is a goal to set up.
So
what are we going to do? What are we
diversity
looking
of development
for?
is
Sorry?
diversity of development as opposed to singularly tourism related. Is that I'm just trying to look for something.
I like input. I think the word development frightens the public because they think annexation and expansion. So if you put in the wording infill, where we can better utilize areas that are already within the city that aren't being used to capacity.
Consensus be infill development then?
So I would support that. Yeah,
that's fine. Because
evaluate.
We're going to hash it out at a
infill development options.
When we discuss the item, anyways.
Yeah.
The other one is E1, enhance quality of life in Solvang by expanding and improving bike lanes, install sidewalks in areas lacking accessibility, and continue to evaluate transit needs. That goal pretty clear? Okay.
Are you still referring to the public input, or are you going to bring that up as a separate?
Separate item. Separate item, yes. Okay, moving on to E2, enhance quality of life in Solvang. Revisit the overall policy of the city contributions, which are grants to outside agencies, and then the possible use of TOT revenue or another identified source to grants, to finance the grants to the nonprofits.
I don't like the absolute number of 2%. Can we just
Okay, but that's what we told the public that we were going to do with that 2% of the TOT when we increased it. That was going to be for our human services, nonprofits that fill in the blanks.
All right.
And if we don't hold our word to that, they're not going to believe us on anything else.
Okay.
That's my opinion. The rest of you may have differing opinion, but I worked on that Measure Z committee, and I know how hard we worked, and I know that they tried 2 or 3 other times before to pass it, and it didn't pass. So we had to let the people know that those funds were going to be used for the citizens of Solvang and not for tourism. So I'm open to hearing other comments.
Is there any materials I can get that like specify what those uses were for that?
So we weren't legally able to identify them. Because then it becomes a specific ballot measure, and then you need 2/3 majority. So
it took more votes than we could.
So there wasn't anything written in it.
Kind of not maybe promise.
Well, we had a
general revenue vote.
We had a brochure that we handed out. It wasn't part of the ballot measure.
Right.
Okay.
But that's what we told the people we were going to use.
It would have to take 2/3 of the vote to pass that.
Right.
For specific funding. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
E3, enhance quality of life in Solvang, increase park acreage for sports teams, revisit the lease with the Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation on Lot 72, and then examine city-owned properties for possible reuse.
Could you, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so examine city-owned properties for possible reuse falls under the augment tourism industry with infill development. I think it is very similar.
No.
Yeah, infill wouldn't be city-owned. That'd be privately owned. So there's a difference. Publicly owned versus private.
Okay. Moving on to the next
so
one.
So I'm sorry. That will only apply to city-owned properties then.
Yes.
Okay.
E4, evaluate capital needs of the city, maintain pavement management systems, maintain capital improvement programs, and improve the safety throughout the city. I1, improve traffic circulation, address the feasibility of a Highway 246 bypass near Santa Rosa, and then encourage Caltrans to accelerate the reconstruction of the 246 Alamo Pintado Bridge. Excuse me. We okay with that?
Are we okay with having a bypass? It will go right bypassing us.
Well, a bypass doesn't mean that it has to go from 154 to the 101 without exits. It could bypass anywhere along 246, but it should be considered because we hear nothing but complaints about the traffic jams within the city. We hear that over and over and over again. So if some of those commuter traffic would bypass the city, that's fine. Some of the traffic that goes to the casino bypass the city, that's fine. But we ought to consider a bypass, and let the.
I wish Eddie was here. He could tell us about all of the struggles they went through trying to get a bypass. It was something that was never going to happen, and I don't believe it's ever going to happen.
And
now.
I agree with you, but the idea is that the public is considering. Or doesn't appreciate, and nor do I, the amount of traffic on 246, so we at least have got to consider it sometime in the future.
Just don't come to town on the weekends.
While we're at it, maybe we can consider some pedestrian underpasses under 246.
And
there you go, or even overpasses like they do
Yeah.
in some town. They just put a whole bunch of them in.
And you remember that that SB CAG is working on a grant application for $350,000 to study the traffic flow on Route 246 between 101 and the 154.
Well,
And
let 'em
during
do
that
it.
study, some offers or considerations probably will be made to a bypass. So that's still in the work. It's still in the mill.
The next one would be improve the city's financial stability, reduce unfunded liabilities, and achieve more sustainable programs, and then finance the need for capital improvements. M would be maintain and improve intergovernmental and agency relations, continuation of the ad hoc committee with the SHUMASH, pursue and enhance library services in working in conjunction with the city of Buellton, and alternative funding options to enhance the library, work with the San Ynez CSD in Los Olivos on wastewater needs, and then work towards a long-term water purchase agreement with ID1. Okay. R1 is revisit the business license program and fees in an effort to increase general fund revenues. And then W1 is the work towards water independence, provide ongoing education to the ratepayers, pursue additional water production and supplies, develop additional storage in short and long term, develop an equitable rate structure sufficient to cover water-related costs, pursue membership with CCWA, evaluate and explore the use of recycled water, make wastewater treatment plant improvements, pursue conjunctive use with ID1, and work towards a long-term purchase agreement, and then finally pursue new efficiencies to lower the rates. Okay, moving forward on that one. Prior to going to the prioritization exercise, I'd like to turn council's attention to the proposed goals from the public. There were 6 of them. Raise a TOT, assess the need for paid parking, create a creative tax revenues, hire a code enforcement officer, more restrictive smoking ordinance, and smart cities, technological enhancements. Why don't we take each one of these on their own merit to see if there's a consensus on councils to add those to the list of the ones that we have right here. So, Mr. Mayor, I'll let you poll your colleagues to see on P1.
Let's start with P1. Is there a feeling that we need to have that on a list of goals or not? I, for one, think that our TOT is at a perfect level compared to the rest of the area. And I think that if we, in the future, sometime down the road, that we need to increase it, I think that we should consider it at that time, but not make that as a goal for now.
What's the highest that some cities even charge for TOT?
In this area, 12 is pretty much the max. You go up to the Bay Area, I think San Francisco, you can get up into 14, 16 maybe, but yeah.
And that is something that would require, we can't just lift that, we have to put that on the
sales tax ballot measure, yeah.
And not only that, but we have the hotels and motels self-imposed a T-bid tax on themselves. So that's money that they don't realize, except it does advertise for them.
Yeah, it's currently 12% on the cost of the room, and then $250 a night per room.
Right. So I think that we should consider that at the time when it becomes necessary to consider it and not have it as a goal issue. Okay, item number P2.
Assess the need for paid parking.
You know my opinion on that. No need for paid parking in the city, and I believe there's a lot of other folks that agree with that. Particularly the merchants.
My concern with our size would be that it actually would generate a loss.
It probably costs you as much to enforce it as you would gain from revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do we want to delete that?
We could put collection boxes. Please.
Donation.
And honor and a loyalty.
Please contribute.
Please donate.
Donate to the city of Solvang.
Yeah, let's eliminate P2 then.
Then we have P3, creative tax revenue.
Can we eliminate tax and maybe creative revenue? I'm serious. Huh?
Just create a term for
revenue.
create revenue.
Create revenue.
Creative
Right,
revenue.
eliminate the word tax.
Okay. And then, so then the question is, do you want it to stand on its own, or would you want it to go under
I think it kind of mixes in
I2?
With which one?
I2.
C1?
Well, R1
C1,
is
that's what I was just saying. It goes along with economic diversity, and then also we put in infill in there, which would be looking for projects that we can already do within our current structure to increase revenue.
So creative revenue then.
Create revenue and P. Okay.
And while Rick walks over there, P4 will be completed on Monday because our code
Right.
enforcement officer will be starting work.
Yeah. Code enforcement officer was recruited and is hired. So thank you for that. Thank you for we've been actually that's been on has been a goal for some time. So it's come to fruition.
So if you keep it as a goal, then you can say you have one success already.
Then we have less incentive to perform moving forward. So
Okay.
P5 is more restrictive smoking ordinance.
I can agree with that as a former smoker. So
yeah, I could agree with that.
Okay.
You put that under quality of life.
So we can't, what do we do with it?
We could make it its own. We can make it its own goal because that leads into a number of other upcoming issues that we'll be facing with smoking.
Like cannabis?
Like cannabis,
Yes.
yeah.
More restrictive.
So maybe
smoking.
cannabis goes along with
Cannabis and smoking goes in the same. I mean, the
Same.
cannabis ordinance and the smoking ordinance would go together. So.
Right.
I2. And then P6.
P6 is smart cities, technological enhancements. That could go under C1.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm. And we're already accomplishing a little bit. We just another 507 water meters just installed.
Yeah.
Smart meters.
Yeah.
Good shot. Under C1.
Hey, it gets the city trucks off the road too. That's a little less traffic.
Less
No, I
gas,
think they
less
still ride
manpower.
around.
Yeah, they're radio reads, so they do have to get close, and then the radio signal
I thought
comes.
they all talked to each other and then came back for some reason, but
No, we're on radio read. We haven't gone to the
Radio read,
smart
alright.
meter yet.
So it's a drive-by now. No water bill.
Okay, moving on. So we feel comfortable with these right here in the wording, and we've taken a couple of these and we moved them over to the whiteboard. So in the prioritization order, each council member will receive 5 green dots and 2 yellow dots that I have right here. Each green dot signifies a goal that the city council member wants to put forward and deem as a major goal to achieve. I would ask that you put the dots near the letter A1, B1, C1, not underneath the subgroups. You want to put them near the letter. Each yellow dot signifies a priority item that council members would like staff to address. So if you had 7 goals, you'd have 7 green ones. These are 5 green ones and then 2 yellow ones. The yellow ones are an important issue that you'd like us to address, staff to address. The goal receiving 3 or more green dots is a consensus of the council. deemed a major goal for next year. Where the yellow dots come into play is that goals that receive 2 green dots and at least 2 yellow dots will be deemed important priorities for city staff to address in 1819. In other words, a goal. Remember, 1 dot per goal per council member, regardless of color. So you can't put a red and a green, or a green and a yellow dot on the same goal. Yes.
Okay, what if after the end of this process, we still like some of those goals that didn't get enough dots? Maybe some of them get loaded up.
Well, I think what staff takes a look at is you have major goals, you have priorities, and then you have significant items should resources come available to address. This is a great exercise because it allows staff to know what's important to the city council. Okay. And it may not be important to all council members, but if it's important to one council member, it's an important goal from that perspective.
Yeah, and they won't disappear. They'll still be in your summary report of
Yes.
what was there.
Yes, they will.
So you can spread your dots.
We don't get enough.
So-
I was trying to figure out. There's
So, Mr.
You know, but you can have that.
So, Mr. Mayor, what I would suggest is I'll pass out the dots to each council member, have you take about 5 minutes to review what you want to put your dots on. I also have, as a courtesy, a 1-page handout, which is what council members need from each other. So you could always 3-hole punch it and put it in your council binders. So when you come to the council meetings, you'll be able to do that. So.
So do you want to take an official break to do this?
Let's take about 5 minutes.
Thank
I think
you.
we can accomplish that.
We're going to watch.
Oh, I thought you were going to take pictures of us putting our dots up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. What I will do is go through what I've determined based off of the sequencing of the dots. It looks like you have 6 very clear major goals. The first one would be B1, benefit to the community at large, identify funding options to finance the state-mandated stormwater management program. C1, create economic diversity, augment the tourist industry with infill development, annex properties in the sphere for light industrial uses, educate the public on the need for economic diversity, creative revenue, and smart cities, technological enhancements. Next one would be E1, enhance the quality of life in Solvang by expanding and or improving bike lanes, installing sidewalks in areas lacking accessibility, and continuing to evaluate the transit needs. E3, which is enhance the quality of life in Solvang, increase park acreage for team sports, revisit the lease with Santa Barbara Trust for Historic Preservation of Lot 72, and examine city-owned properties for possible reuse. I2, improve the city's financial stability, reduce unfunded liabilities and achieve more sustainable programs, finance needed capital improvements, and more restrictive smoking ordinance. Thank you, Dave. I can go up there. Okay. I was going to have to make an appointment with my chiropractor on that one.
Did you say E3?
It'd be E3, yes.
Well, there's just one yellow dot there.
No,
It's
there's
not
2
three
yellow dots. There's 2 yellow dots, 2 green dots.
Well, I guess I can't see the second yellow dot.
The next one would be
E3 has 2 and 2?
M1. M1 is maintain and improve intergovernmental and agency relations, continuation of the ad hoc committee with the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians, pursue enhanced library services in Buellton and alternative funding opportunities, work with the Santa Ynez CSD in Los Olivos on wastewater needs, and then work towards a long-term water purchase agreement with ID1. Those are the 6 main city goals. The other ones would be items of importance that I will make note on in my final report, those that received at least 3 of the dots, either 2 green and 1 yellow, or the 2 yellow and 1 green. Those would be things that we would probably put forward for staff's consideration on that. So again, it would be a tiered approach. It would be major goals, and then other significant important items pending available resources.
Okay. Is this where you do the wrap-up and summary?
This is the wrap-up and summary, Mr. Mayor. So those are the 6 goals that will be identified in 1819. I will work with your city manager on providing you a final copy of this, along with the other major important issues that council would like staff to address, resources permitting. Staff will come back with finalized slate of goals, possibly in conjunction with the proposed budget. And I thank you for this evening. The goal was to finish right around 5 o'clock.
We're pretty close.
We're about 15 minutes behind. So.
And those are taken up by breaks, so you're right on time.
Right on time. Yes. Yeah.
But just before we adjourn, is there any other have any comments before we adjourn?
My only comments about this is just the timing of the event. So it's like 3 o'clock on a Monday, you know, who can actually be here from the public? And part of this is to encourage public engagement. And I just feel like we probably need another session or something. You know, there were some suggestions of something at a later time or even on the weekend where people could actually make it here. You know, we got people running businesses, they've got families, kids to pick up right now. I mean, you name it. They're at work. They can't, you know, they don't sit at home all day long. So it makes it very difficult for them to show up here and give input. And I would like to see that. I'd also like to see, you know, where does this council focus on with where our dots lined up in conjunction with how the public sees it. You know, what do they want to see us prioritize? Those would be all things that I'd be interested in seeing.
Yeah, and typically we've done workshops the afternoon before council meetings. That's historically how we've done it, and that's why we chose. This wasn't Rick's choice. This was just what we've typically done. We definitely could follow up with you put all this together in the report and have another workshop that has that, as the focus of discussion. If you want to do something like that. I mean, as Rick said, the impetus is you're going to put this together. These are your 6 goals, and then you'll probably want to focus on one at the agenda as an agenda item to clarify those objectives in there. So what do you want to focus on? So there'll be an individual action on each of these.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm just looking for that more public engagement, making it more friendly for more people to actually show up and engage in this. So, I don't know if there's any support behind doing something that is more conducive to that, or maybe we fit it in with our current council meeting times, such as, we meet Mondays at 6:30 p.m. Maybe we just bite off 2 goals per packet until it's done. So that way it gives the opportunity for someone from the public to say, okay, these are the ones I want to focus on. I'm going to show up when that one comes up on the agenda because I want to come talk about it. It's also a little daunting when, you got everyone here and there's all this going on, for everyone to try to communicate what's important to them and digest all of this, including the council doing that, is a little bit of a daunting of a task. So, if there's any support for that, I'd be fully behind that.
Yeah, I'd support breaking it up into per meetings or whatever. We have, a topic and go through them that way. I support that.
Yeah, let's set aside then.
Yeah,
a
we'll put 'em in the
portion
next
of the
agenda.
council meetings at
2 per meeting or something, or
1 or 2 per meeting.
Yeah.
Depending on the agenda that we have before us, or maybe an item that's going to take all night, like some things. So then Brad will generate the agenda item, and I'll go over it, and then if I feel like that it's out of shape or something, or it's not going to work, I'll let you know. Right. Yeah, paid parking will definitely not be on the agenda. if I got a pencil with any of it on it. Does anybody else like to comment on this process we had today?
Thank you for all your time and effort.
And I want to thank the public for coming. It's and it's unfortunate that we can't satisfy everybody. That some people can't come at night, some people can't come on the weekends, and we do it the best we can. And I think this process of reviewing these goals during an agenda, during our regular meetings, will be helpful to the public, and so they'll be aware. And Rick, I want to thank you for your efforts. You did a fine job. At least our interview was good as far as I was concerned, and I assume that it was the rest of the council agreed to. And so with that, our regular council meeting starts at 6:30, another about an hour and 10 minutes from now, so we'll see you back then. We're adjourned.